Hey, Planeswalkers, Mythras here. Hope you're doing well and staying safe. We get another one of my favorite days. It is tier list day, my friends. Yesterday we covered the best of one. Today is the best of three tier list for Kaldheim and for our February segment here. Now, for those of you that are new, those of you that are returning, I appreciate you tuning in. We do have a lot to cover where we are going to talk about the tier list. We will also dive into observations that are specific to best of three. You guys can check out the ones from best of one yesterday. I'll make sure that's down below there as well for you. And then also we'll wrap up with a couple high-level observations, some decks that I just want to share briefly here for you. Now, before we get started, as always, just a huge thank you. I truly appreciate your support. Feel free to subscribe down over there. Additionally, like the video, other great ways for us to stay connected down below in the description. And you guys can absolutely check out the timestamps. Oh, and hint, the tier list is there for you too. So before we get started here, I just want to make one other quick mention. I'm adding and rolling out new content to the channel. I plan on doing a weekly meta segment that's a little bit fast, a little bit furious to help you stay on top of the meta at a fast clip evolving pace. And then second, I continue to plan on working with other content creators and doing some collaboration work. So with that said, let's hop into it while you're here today to check out this best of three tier list, my friends. So this is exactly what we have going on here, which is quite a bit. We got 20 plus decks. What you'll see, and we'll talk about this in the trends piece in a second, is a couple of key items. So for those of you that follow me or don't follow me, what I do is generally a 1, 2, 3 tier list stack rank. This is within and of itself, but also against some of the other decks that aren't listed here. So for example, Tybalt's Trickery. So with that, it's very important to understand that the stack rank helps you understand and assess where things are, how they work against each other, and which deck might be the best or most successful deck for you to play, as we like to say, crack the meta kind of a thing. But obviously, as many of you know, this does change given the tier that you're in. Ideally, though, we look at Mythic and work our way backwards from there. So with that, our tier 1 is comprised of Mono White Aggro, Mono Red Snow, and Naya Aggro Adventures. Our tier 2 list here is the biggest segment. Generally, I follow kind of a bell curve here. And we have Dimir, Lurrus, Rogues. We have Is It Tempo, Temur Aggro, aka Wet Gruul, Mono Green Aggro, Rakdos Sacrifice, 4-color, or also known as Sultai You're in Control, Temur Ultimatum, also followed by Sultai Emergent, also known as Sultai Ultimatum. I know several of you have asked me about that. Then we have Esper Yorion Doom, we have Jund Gigantha Sacrifice, Grixis Control, Mono White Life Gain, Mono Red Boast. This is kind of like your traditional Mono Red aggro deck, a little bit different though. And then as we move into tier 3, we have Jeskai Spells, we have Boros Aggro, Abzan Adventures, Mardu Gigantha Winata, and then Jeskai Flyers, my friend. So that is the tier list. You guys can check that out down below. Additional details, videos there for you for each of these with the deck links. Also, I do post this on my personal website, so you guys can absolutely go check that out and get more context around that. I usually, if you follow me on Reddit or see the Reddit postings, I add a lot of other flavor and context to it in a blog post. So that is what we got going on. As I mentioned before, questions, comments, let me know. Feel free to hop in the Discord server, my friends. So with that, we'll move into the key observations and trends, because this is pretty important, particularly as those of you that are both competitive and casual players. I like to look at the past, look at the present, and look at where we're headed in the future potentially. And understanding these time trends really helps us dissect that and understand. And particularly in best of three, there are some key items that maybe you've caught on to already. If not, we're certainly going to call those out. So a couple points here in terms of these observations or key points of interest. The first piece here that you'll notice in the tier 1 space is it's really about aggro. Aggro has become the new meta, not only in best of 1 but also best of 3. You guys can check out the tier 1 list for best of 1, but this is one of the first times that we've really seen both best of 1 and best of 3 at the top top end and pretty similar in terms of synergies, which I find very fascinating. It's also certainly something that I did not consider as we moved into Kaldheim here, which also represents a couple things that we've already talked about yesterday, but again, alluding to the health of standard. We came from a healthy meta. We've now moved into a healthy meta with a new release with Kaldheim, and has gone off fairly smooth. So it's pretty important to understand that because it is different. Most of tier 1 was dominated. So as part of another piece here was dominated by 3 color drops or 3 color 3-color decks or multicolored decks, and a lot of those have kind of fallen out of favor. And originally I thought maybe going back and looking at some of these trends pieces, I've been doing it for over 6 months now, thinking that at the start potentially we would see aggro domination, and over time, particularly like Zendikar's Rising, we'd see some of that rotation out. That wasn't the case. Additionally, given the new modal lands, we would have expected potentially some of those powerful tier 1 decks that we had before to continue to stay there, but that's not necessarily the case. So maybe potentially, obviously, things do cycle. So in terms of the motions, the ocean, as I like to call it, it'll be interesting to see if we continue to follow this kind of aggro to mid-range to late game, or we'll see how this meta evolves. We've certainly got a lot of the carryover effect, as I like to say, so I did touch on this a little bit yesterday. But really, these are decks that are well positioned going into a new set release that continue to do well. And again, just that explosive nature, particularly around aggro and around what we've seen in best of 1, it is rather fascinating to see for our best of 3 game as well. Now, there are some things that I do want to highlight in terms of event implications. So we certainly know that there's some big things going on this weekend and other events coming up that I truly believe that will impact the meta here. One of those, looking backwards, has been that 5K Kaldheim tournament by SCG. This is really what I also alluded to yesterday in the Jedi Mind Tricks segment, or also just buyer beware. The reality is that this tournament, it exposed Sultai Emergent or Sultai Ultimatum as what a lot of people were expecting to be tier 1. I know, again, MTG Arena Zone, who I have a lot of respect for, has that as a tier 1 deck right now. Certainly, I do not believe that. Certainly, given where we were in best of 3 as a tier 4 deck, moving here, not enough pickups, and the data reveals that. And that to me is pertinent from that particular event, the 5K SCG Kaldheim tournament. Additionally, the other thing that we got out of that was not only was Sultai Emergent or Ultimatum one of the most played decks, it was sub 50% in terms of a win rate. But one of the things that came out of that was Mono Red Snow. So as part of some of those aggressive weekly segments, I'll touch on that a little bit more potentially this week as we do that. So just a couple keynotes there and things to follow. And then additionally, what I was kind of surprised enough, we look to the past as an example, one of the big things that came out of post-Omnath ban was Channel Fireball's Pro Tournament or Pro Showdown, where we saw the rise of Selesnya Yorion. Became a very popular deck and very pivotal in terms of the format and as well as its percentage of playing the archetype. We got a new one here with, I think it's Biondo, probably butchered that. You guys can check out the deck, but the Esper Yorion Doom deck. So that one took number 1. It took that tournament down. We didn't see as much of a pull or play with that deck. So I do want to highlight that for you, because I was also under the impression that Esper Yorion Doom was going to have a little bit more ramifications in the meta. It certainly crushed Mono Red. It certainly crushed some of these other things. It's just not as well adopted right now. So keep an eye on that one. It is certainly in the middle of tier 2 right now. It is slightly lower than the Sultai Emergent. I do think that there's a lot of potential still with this deck, so keep an eye on it. And then another call out here that I do want to mention that I didn't mention in the best of 1 that I think is also pretty interesting. I'm calling it the mobile effect or mobile effect, whatever you want to call it. We know that Arena was launched on tablet forms, Android, all that stuff. And be careful, because I potentially think that one of the reasons why we're seeing a lot of these aggro decks is because of mobile, for two things: new accounts being created, so people that have a happy path, less rare heavy or mythic heavy in terms of cost to play, tends to be a little bit better in the deck choices that we have here. The other piece is ease of use. So I've certainly used the UI. I think it's a lot of fun, but it's a lot easier to pilot an aggro deck and a linear deck versus some of these other decks. You got to make and choose a lot of things, and you know, a lot of practice goes into making the right choices, not misclicking, those kinds of things. So I think I'm throwing that out there now because I think it's something worth watching, and that exposure to a broader market. Obviously, it's all tied into one, but let's keep an eye on that because I think that mobile effect is going to have some ramifications as we go on. Last but not least, are we surprised? That's kind of how I closed and concluded yesterday's best of one segment. Want to do the same with today. I wasn't as surprised with best of one. Best of three, I am certainly surprised. So, and again, that is really around the aggro theme that we're seeing, not the multicolored theme so much. We do see it a little bit with Naya aggro adventures there, but a couple of key items. And again, let's keep an eye on how this meta is going to evolve because I think it's be rather interesting. We're starting to see the rise of the sacrifice decks a little bit more. They eat aggro decks for breakfast, literally. So it's important for us to stay tuned and stay on top of those. Immerstrom Dragon is certainly one and tough thing to deal with. So keep that in mind, my friends. So that is what we have in terms of the key observations, the deck list, the tier list there. Appreciate your support as always. Please feel free to subscribe down over there, and additionally like the video and other great ways to support the channel down below in the details. So with that, we are now going to move into the final portion of today's video where we are going to cover a couple of key themed decks here that I think are pretty important. Additionally, these decks that we are going to cover here certainly are different than the ones that we covered in the best of one lineup, so you're going to get a different flavor here. Today we're going to talk about the Naya aggro deck, we're going to talk about Sultai Yorion, and then additionally another fun one here, Grixis Control. So first off, we got the Naya aggro deck. This one was number 2 at one point. A big piece of that is Showdown of the Scalds. What I do find interesting relative to some of the other pieces in the tier list there was that Showdown is there, but it's not as prominent as maybe initially we thought. So just kind of keep an eye out. This is a very interesting flavor of Naya aggro. There's certainly other ones out there, but this is the one that I covered. And the big piece around this is really leveraging that adventure play, but also stacking on some of these things at the higher end with Showdown of the Scalds. We got Toski, Bearer of Secrets for a continued draw. We got Feldar Retreat to build our board, and a number of other things. And then in terms of the best of 3, obviously I talked through the aggro, the mid-range, and the late game lineups in more detail down below in those particular videos for you. So that is really what this deck's about. It's leveraging the aggro mechanic of adventure for the continued draw, getting a lot of different pieces in there. Shepherd of the Flock was certainly something I think was underplayed a ton. We're starting to see a lot more play with this guy, so keep on top of that. I do like the inclusion of Mass Vandal. This is a pretty good card because it allows you some early game and late game advantage with that exiling target artifact or enchantments here, and really builds well and has a nice healthy curve here for an aggro deck. So that is one that I definitely wanted to cover because we have a new tier 1 archetype in there. Then additionally, we began to see the rise of the Sultai Yorion Control decks here. I really think it's a 4-color Yorion Control because we do splash for red, and we do so importantly for Velki, God of Lies, and that Tybalt. So this is very important. Continue to keep an eye on this. This is certainly beginning to flood best of 1. I know I've heard many of you in the Discord server talk about this. Certainly seen it in some of the boards and things as well. What is important about this is that it certainly ties down the early game nicely. You get a lot of access to things to lock things down, get the draws that you need, and then we get the ability to one for many a lot of items here and gain a lot of synergies and leverage with some of these other pieces. Ashiok Nightmare, I believe, was one that I swapped in on this particular deck. I believe there were some other ones that you could do here, but obviously check out the video. I do talk about that. Ashiok ran really nicely though for me in this particular version. Again, this was a #1 deck at one point. And then here's what we got in terms of the sideboard. Again, similar story here with this and the inclusions in terms of the aggro, mid-range, and late game lineup. All right, and last but not least, our third and final deck, one that I like, which is essentially an Izzet expansion into Grixis Control, leveraging the best things that we get out of our swamp color and the black color here, which is very important because it gives us access to additional 1 for many and also direct kill spells that are rather important. Additionally, building out our sideboard capabilities and handling some other decks that an Izzet Flash or Izzet Control deck or Izzet Tempo deck might not be as readily available to handle. Again, strong in the slot 2. Then we begin to see some of these other pieces here in terms of controlling the board. Behold the Multiverse is very important. It's added a ton of value. The ability to scry 2, draw 2, foretell it, get a cheap investment, and then hit it later is very important here. A lot of great things. We'll continue to watch this as this evolves. I had a lot of success with this deck as well. So that is what this one is. Again, more details down below for you if you want to get into this particular deck for yourselves down below. So to close out here, these were the 3 decks that we covered: Naya, Aggro, Sultai, Yorion Control, Grixis Control. A lot of the other ones we had covered at a high level, again, for our best of 1 video, so you guys can check that out. These 3 I felt definitely had a nice touch in terms of where they stand in the meta, what we're going to see, and kind of how things evolve, I think, over the next couple weeks and into next month, as we then begin to build out more decks, review more top decks for you, and then grow our expansion of the tier list here, my friends. So with that, if you have any questions or comments, finally, again, please let me know. Happy to help. Any feedback is always much appreciated. And then also feel free to hop in that Discord server, my friends. We did talk about the tier list. We covered it. It's available for you down below. We talked about a lot of key trends and observations. So to recap again at a high level, it's all about that aggro. We're going to continue to see things shift and shape. We got some big events coming up that certainly will impact standard as we know it, and particularly best of 3 as well. And then we covered 3 decks that I thought were worthy of a spotlight here for us today to circle back on, dive into at a high level, and obviously you guys can follow up and do more research on them. With that, Planeswalkers, truly, I appreciate your support. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel down over there. Additionally, like the video. You guys can like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Twitch, stay up to date on content like this. Flip those notifications on. You guys will see them. And then, as always, really appreciate the patrons. Elfie, thank you. And also, you know, the YouTube members. Lots of great ways for us to connect. So very, very appreciative of all that support, everyone. So with that, Planeswalkers, until next time, which is going to be really soon because we do a daily top deck, stay tuned for a lot of other cool, innovative stuff that we're going to be bringing to the channel to keep you equipped, keep you informed, and keep you up to date. So with that, Planeswalkers, I am out. I'm going to go get on my Twitch bandwagon for today because I know several of you are waiting. So stay tuned, my friends. Mythras out, and until next time, we'll see you again soon. Stay safe.